Many generations now, we have suffered. The Washichu we spoke to, but they don't hear. They're deaf. The women, the children, the old ones, they suffer. You from the cities, you are our warriors. Our warriors. They're deaf. We must now walk in the sacred way.
Shalom. Shalom. Welcome to another installment of the final American Indian Uprising. This is the conclusion of the topic that we were going into, dealing with the Pequot tribe. Like we were saying, each week we're going to be doing these shows, and we're going to continue to deal with different tribes, okay, dealing with different Native American tribes throughout what you call, or throughout what our people used to call Turtle Island, so-called North America, aka Babylon. Okay, this land known as North America, which was the land, or is the land that our people have dwelt in for hundreds of years, for over really 2,000 years, over 1,000 years, okay, 2,500 years our people have dwelt in this land since we came over from the Middle East, over from the land of Israel. The so-called Native American tribes, Gad, Reuben, Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, all right? But the particular tribe we were going into, which is from the tribe of Gad, the Pequot, the Massachusetts Pequot Indians, on the last installment, this is the conclusion to that. And then we're going to go into other tribes, dealing with other information on other tribes, and we're going to just go down the line, showing the wickedness that these so-called white people have done to our people, the so-called native people of this Turtle Island, right? So the brother has some more information we're going to bring out concerning the Pequot tribe up here in Connecticut, the Massachusetts Pequot, okay? Now, bring out your information, brother, and we're going to back all this information up with scripture, okay?
Okay, so this is basically kind of like a slight recap of where we left off from last week, going into what we didn't finish on the last show. It says in early 1634, it says Pequot strength is concentrated along the Pequot, now Thames River, and Mystic Rivers, in what is now southeastern Connecticut. In a desperate attempt.
I'm sorry, that's talking about right up. If you live here in Connecticut, which at the moment we happen to reside here in the land that's known as Connecticut. Yep. Because Connecticut is an Indian name, anyways.
That's right.
It's a so-called Indian name. Okay, Connecticut. I don't know if it's a Pequot word or if it's a Paguksit word, because those are the tribes that were here: the Pequot, the Massachusetts Pequot were here, and also the Paguksit, which Bridgeport belongs to the Paguksit.
Right, the Golden Hill Paguksit.
The Golden Hill Paguksit, which I believe Tusquantum, or the guy known as Squanto, was a part of that tribe. He was Paguksit. Squanto, or his real name was Tusquantum. Okay? Anyways, if you go up along that, it's talking about the Mystic. When you go up 95 and you go up to like around exit 92. That's where the Foxwoods Pequot Reservation is, in the Foxwoods Casino, which is owned by the Pequot tribe. And then after that, or exit 91, I believe, the exit before 92, that's they have the Mystic Aquarium. Now the tribe, I don't believe, owns that. That's owned by the state. It's an aquarium. Right? That's the land area that it's talking about. That right in that region, if you're familiar with Connecticut. Okay? Right along 95 North, 92 is Stonington. That's all Pequot land. That's where all this took place.
Yep.
Right up around that area. That's where this took place.
Just before you cross on the Rhode Island.
Just before you cross on the Rhode Island border. And when you cross the Rhode Island border, that goes into the land of the Narragansett and the Wampanoag. Read on, brother.
It says, in a desperate attempt by the Pequots to regain their trade monopoly lost to other tribes, they attacked and killed some Narragansetts attempting to trade at a Dutch trading outpost called the House of Hope.
That's right. So the Pequots and the Narragansetts were actually rivals.
Yep.
Now, like I said, around 92 exit, once you go past Foxwoods, you end up in Rhode Island border. The Rhode Island border, so their lands, their hunting lands of the Narragansett and the Pequot bordered each other. So it was not uncommon sometimes for Narragansetts to get caught on the wrong side of the border as far as the lands go. The territory of the Narragansett was right next door to the Pequot, so they were actually neighbors. So it wasn't uncommon for some Narragansetts to sometimes end up on Pequot hunting grounds, or for Pequots to end up on Narragansett hunting grounds. So that's these two Gadite bands. They had they had an altercation with each other.
Yep.
Which that's what our people are. Our people, when you look in the scriptures, Israel was always having altercations with other Israelites, man.
That's right.
Israel was always getting into beefs with other Israel. Other tribes are always getting into beefs with other tribes, man.
That's right.
At one time, the tribe of Benjamin went to war against all Israel, man. One tribe fought all the rest of the tribes. So that's not uncommon.
Yep. That's
a part of the curses, man. In Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, every man's eye should be evil toward his neighbor. All right, go ahead, brother.
It says the Dutch retaliate. In one of the skirmishes that followed, the Dutch kidnapped the Pequot Grand Sachem to Tobin.
Sachem was a chief. A Sachem was a chief. Go ahead, brother.
Despite the Pequot's payments of a ransom, the Dutch execute him. So the Pequots paid the ransom to get to Tobin back, and then the Dutch execute him. That's the fucking so-called white man.
That's the devil, the so-called white man.
He's and the Dutch, dirty dog.
And the Dutch were a part of the first crackers that came to North America. They were one of the first honky groups that come to North America, primarily here in the East Coast. You have the Hudson River, that today is known down in New York City, which the Hudson runs all the way upstate New York, from New York City, what's today known as New York City, going all the way up into Albany, man.
That's right.
You could take a boat from New York City, New York Harbor, all the way, and it puts you up in Albany, man. That's why when the Dutch, Henry Hudson, that first Dutch cracker, when they came into what's known today as New York City area, okay, and they set up shop and they built the city. That's why New York City was founded, and these so-called cities were founded, man, because that was a water route. The boats could come in and flow all the way up into Albany. That's why Albany was set up. That's how they were able to set up these major cities, because that was a water route. It was right along the Hudson River, man.
Sure.
And those were all, Henry Hudson was Dutch. So the Dutch are the ones that first colonized the area today known as Manhattan, Brooklyn. I used to live out in Brooklyn years ago, out in East New York, Brooklyn, in a block called Skank Avenue, right? That was the, New Lots on the corner of, if you are familiar, if anybody sees this show and you're familiar with Brooklyn or New York City, I used to live in an area called East New York, Brooklyn, and on the corner of Skank and New Lots, right on the corner, there's this big blue building. It's a daycare center. And across the street from that is like this other so-called community center. Next door to the community center is an old Dutch church. The place been there since the 1600s. And this is out in East New York, Brooklyn. And right next to the church is an old graveyard, a cemetery. And nobody's been buried in that cemetery for over maybe 400 years, man. Because I remember we used to climb over the fence. The cemetery is blocked up because it's an old cemetery. We used to climb over the fence and go read the headstones. And the headstones, when you look at the dates, is 1700s, 1600s, some from the 1800s. Okay, but the dates, some of the dates go all the way back to the 1600s. Okay, so that was, and all the names in the headstones were Dutch. As a matter of fact, the guys that the blocks in that neighborhood are named after, those actual guys are buried in that cemetery. Because the name of that street is called New Lots. In there, you see a big headstone that says, "Here lies New Lots." Skank Avenue, the guy who was the block Skank, he's buried. Those are Dutch names. But there's another street out there called Bobby Street. That particular guy, I know, because I went inside the cemetery and looked at and we read it. And all the blocks in that neighborhood are named after the actual crackers who lived in that, who inhabited that area back in the 1600s. The Dutch, who was out in Brooklyn. The tribes were out there. The Canarsie Indians were all out in the Brooklyn area. That tribe is not to be heard of today. A lot of them were pushed out into different areas. A lot of them were killed off. I know a sister, a Gadite sister, who was actually Canarsie, and can trace her lineage back into the Brooklyn area. Okay? A lot of the Canarsie Indians were pushed out of Brooklyn. When the Dutch came in there, they pushed all the Indians out. Not all of them were killed off. Some of them were pushed out into other areas west, and they integrated with other tribes. That's what happened. There's no such thing as whole tribes being wiped out. A lot of tribes were killed, and then the survivors migrated to other areas, south, north, or west, and they attached onto other tribes. And they lost their so-called identity as a tribe because they integrated with another tribe, intermarried with another tribe, and that's what happened. That's why when you go into these areas, you say, what happened to all the Indians that used to live here? A lot of them were killed off, and a lot of them left and migrated with other tribes to survive. You devils are the cause of, you white people. You're going to pay for that too, man. But go ahead, brother.
It says the Dutch kidnapped the Pequot Grand Sachem to Tobin. Despite the Pequot's payments of a ransom, the Dutch executed. With the death of Tobin, his son Sassacus becomes Grand Sachem of the Pequot.
That's what the white man will do. Go ahead, brother.
It says, in spring of 1634, a scurrilous Englishman and pirate named John Stone.
All these white people are pirates, man. You all a bunch of goddamn pirates. Thieves. Pillagers. That's all you white people. Go ahead, man.
Named John Stone sails up the Connecticut River and kidnaps several Indians for ransom. Stone and his crew failed to keep a careful watch, and identified Indians board the vessel and kill all 9 Englishmen aboard. The English blamed the Pequots, and for 2 years they demand that the Pequots deliver the heads of those who had killed Stone and his crew. The Pequots counter that if the killer of Stone was a Pequot, the Pequot must have killed him in retribution for the Dutch murder of Tobin. The Pequots also assert that they would not know the difference between a Dutchman and an Englishman. The mystery of who killed Stone is never totally solved. The Pequots invite the English to settle in Connecticut as a token of friendship. Excuse me.
Okay,
and do not interfere with the new settlements. In 1633, the English Puritan settlements at Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay colonies began expanding into the rich Connecticut River Valley to accommodate the steady stream of new immigrants from England.
Okay.
It says in 1635.
And you can comment on it as well, brother. You go into it, man.
Yep.
The spirit is on you.
It says in 1635, the Pequot named Uncas, and this is the same man that Uncasville, Connecticut, where the Mohegan Sun Casino was at. Uncas was the actual Pequot who broke off from the Pequots, and then they called themselves Mohegan, which means the wolf people. Now, the Pequot named Uncas has plans to clash with the Grand Sachem Sassacus. So Uncas is clashing with the Grand Sachem of the Pequots, Sassacus, who was the son of Tobin that the Dutch murdered. So now Uncas is going to clash with Sassacus now. It says the strategy in dealing with Europeans. He is concerned that the only way for his people to survive inevitable violence with the Europeans and to prevent being swallowed up by them is to try to create a peaceful alliance with them.
Many generations now, we have suffered. The Washichu we spoke to, but they don't hear, they're deaf. The women, the children, the old ones, they suffer. You from the cities, you are our warriors, our warriors. They're deaf. We must now walk in the sacred way. You gonna die!